It dazzles from a distance. Golden crowns, crimson thrones. Rooms fall silent when a king enters. But look closer. Behind the velvet robes are bruised shoulders. Behind the voice that commands nations is a mind filled with whispers. What if it locks you in a palace of mirrors, where every reflection agrees, but none tells the truth? Today, we open the door to those palaces, where kings weren't just feared, they were imprisoned by their own crowns. A crown can hide many things, but never the fear in a man's eyes. The life of Henry VIII began like a promise, golden, glorious, and destined for greatness. At 17, he became king, and England rejoiced. He was tall, strong, with golden red hair and a face that reminded courtiers of angels in stained glass windows. He danced, he jousted, he wrote poetry, he charmed everyone. But few remember that the first years of his reign were marked by a hunger for approval, from the Pope, from nobles, from foreign kings. He wasn't born to be king. His brother Arthur was. Henry wore the crown only because fate intervened. And with that crown came a mask. Behind the mask of majesty was a man who never felt truly secure. Even early on, he showed signs of cruelty beneath the charm. In 1510, just a year into his reign, he had two of his father's financial ministers, Richard Empson and Edmund Dudley, executed, not for crimes, but to distance himself from his father's unpopular reign. A political move, but also a glimpse into a future ruled by fear. By 1521, he turned on his closest friend, the Duke of Buckingham, for imagined plots. The Duke's execution shocked the court. The message was clear. Friendship and loyalty were fragile, and the king felt threatened. And then came the obsession with producing an heir. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, began with love, but ended with doubt and despair. Each failed pregnancy deepened his fear. Not just personal failure, but dynastic collapse. Here, the prison of power tightened. The king could no longer be seen as vulnerable. And so the mask hardened. He broke from Rome, not for faith, but for control. When the Pope refused to annul his marriage, Henry declared himself head of the Church of England. It was the boldest political move of the century, but also a turning point in his descent into isolation. The man who once laughed at court feasts now distrusted everyone around him, and one by one, they fell. Thomas More, once his closest confidant, beheaded for refusing to recognize his supremacy. Anne Boleyn, who had promised him sons, was executed under charges no one truly believed. Henry had become the crown, and the crown had become a cage. He ruled not with vision, but with paranoia. He rewrote laws to serve his whims. He married 6 times, not in search of love, but in pursuit of a legacy he could never secure. What began as a glorious reign had become a slow-burning tragedy. A man, worshipped by a nation, now trapped in a palace built by fear. When a man wears the mask too long, he forgets who he was beneath it. A man can rule a kingdom and still lose himself. By the 1530s, Henry was no longer the Golden Prince. He had grown heavier, more irritable, and increasingly paranoid. He trusted no one, not his council, not his allies, not even his wives. What began as ambition was now obsession. He feared betrayal in every whisper, and he answered fear with blood. Thomas Cromwell, the man who helped him break from Rome, was executed in 1540. Just a few years earlier, Cromwell had orchestrated Anne Boleyn's downfall. Now he met the same fate. Henry's leg wound, likely from a jousting accident in 1536, refused to heal. It festered, becoming infected, then ulcerated. It smelled. It ached. It defined him. Pain changed him. He stopped riding, stopped dancing, stopped laughing. Instead, he sat on the throne, bloated, angry, suspicious. He turned on friends with alarming ease, executed wives who displeased him, and reshaped laws so no one could question him. But perhaps the cruelest twist of all is that Henry knew. He knew he was becoming what he once feared, and yet he couldn't stop. Power, once tasted, demands more, even when it devours the man who holds it. He had won the crown, but lost the world around him. By the late 1540s, Henry VIII ruled with absolute authority. No voice dared to contradict him. No man questioned his decisions. But absolute power comes at a price. Silence. His court, once filled with music, now echoed with careful words and forced smiles. Nobles bowed lower, but feared more. Servants stepped lightly, avoiding his gaze. He had reshaped England to his will, severed ties with Rome, dissolved monasteries, and declared himself the supreme head of the church. But what did he gain? The faith of the people? Number, the love of his subjects. Number, only control and fear. He built palaces not just of stone, but of rules and walls. No one came close without permission. No one spoke freely in his presence. Even his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, learned to tread carefully, watching their words as if every sentence could decide their fate. Foreign ambassadors wrote home of a king who smiled with his mouth, but not with his eyes. He had become a shadow of a monarch, omnipresent but unreachable. A man who had everything, yet trusted no one. His meals were tasted, his chambers guarded, his nights sleepless. He feared assassins, he feared uprisings, he feared himself. Because deep down, Henry knew power wasn't keeping him safe. It was keeping him alone. A kingdom built on fear is ruled by ghosts. In his final years, Henry VIII was no longer a man of flesh and will, but a symbol of dread. Every footstep near his chamber stirred anxiety. Every command carried the weight of life or death. He sat alone in massive halls, haunted by portraits of those he had condemned. 6 wives, 2 executed. Friends turned traitors. Ministers vanished overnight. The echoes in his palace were not of music, but of memories. He no longer walked the gardens he once adored. The scent of roses reminded him of Anne Boleyn. He no longer played music. His lute sat untouched, a relic of a softer past. Even sleep brought him no peace. Witnesses claimed he screamed in the night, that he saw ghosts, that he spoke to shadows. His leg, swollen, infected, kept him seated, trapped. But it was his conscience that truly chained him. Letters became shorter, conversations colder. His eyes rarely met another's gaze. He wore the crown still, but it no longer brought him pride. It was heavy, like a burden forged from every drop of blood spilled. In the end, it wasn't the weight of England that broke him. It was the weight of his own regrets. When kings fall, they don't fall alone. By 1546, Henry VIII was but a shadow of his former glory. His massive frame was carried by mechanical contraptions. His leg wound festered, and the stench followed him everywhere. Those closest to him learned to speak in whispers. They tiptoed around his moods, his silence, his rage. He was no longer feared as a man. He was feared as a myth. Power had hollowed him out. Every decision was made in paranoia, every document sealed in desperation. His last wife, Catherine Parr, survived only through intellect and submission. She read to him. She soothed him. She quoted scripture while hiding her own opinions. He trusted her. Barely. By then, his thoughts were no longer on life, but on legacy. He revised wills, shifted alliances, planned his death like a campaign, and yet, beneath it all, there was fear. Not of death, but of judgment. Some said he begged for mercy. Others claimed he demanded monuments. What is certain, he died alone, surrounded not by family, but by silence. The man who once claimed divine right died with no one holding his hand. Not a king, not a tyrant, just a man, broken by the weight of everything he had taken. A king's legacy isn't measured by what he built, but by what he shattered. After Henry VIII's death, what he left behind was not a unified kingdom, but a fractured nation, divided in politics, in faith, in soul. The executions, the broken marriages, the shattered church, all carved scars too deep to be seen as marks of glory. The Church of England fell into chaos. Religious strife soon followed. His 3 children, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I, each inherited the crown and the damage in their own way. Edward, a boy king, pushed further reforms. Mary, seeking redemption for her father's sins, tried to restore Catholicism in blood and fire. And Elizabeth, who never forgot that Henry had executed her mother, chose a different path. She walked a line between factions, keeping England spiritually independent, pragmatic, strategic, peaceful, at least on the surface. Henry had not built an empire. He had left a chessboard, mid-game and burning, a legacy of ambition, built on fear and passed on like a curse. The crown he wore outlived him, but the shadow he cast never left. History always remembers Henry VIII for his ruthless decisions. but few recall the fear he carried in his heart. Death freed Henry from the agony of his body, but the haunting weight of legacy, of misjudgments and moral collapse, clung to his name. In his final years, he feared curses. He feared betrayal by the very children he left behind. The bed in Hampton Court became the place where Henry faced his life. Some say he muttered the names of the dead, those he had condemned, those he had once loved. But the most chilling truth, he felt no regret. He believed it was all necessary to preserve the crown. Henry VIII died a king, but history still debates whether he lived as a man. Time is the only judge who never dies. Centuries have passed, but the shadow of Henry VIII remains etched in stone, scripture, and memory. To some, he was the king who gave England its independence from Rome, who birthed the Church of England, who ruled with strength. To others, he was a tyrant, unpredictable, cruel, and obsessed with control. The very institutions he created were soaked in contradiction. A church founded for love, yet built on blood. A reign remembered for majesty, but haunted by paranoia. His image hangs in palaces and textbooks, studied, debated, painted, performed. And the question lingers, was he a genius of statecraft or a monster in royal robes? Modern historians still disagree. Some say he was a necessary force, brutal, yes, but pivotal in shaping England's identity. Others insist he set a precedent of fear and authoritarianism that echoed for generations. Perhaps the truth, like the man, wears a crown and a mask. And so the judgment is passed, not in one voice, but in the endless whispers of history. And when the crown is gone, what remains of the man who wore it? Henry VIII died over 475 years ago, but his legacy still haunts us. He is remembered not only in history books, but in our culture, our art, our laws, and in every corner of England that still bears the scars of his decisions. He was a man of grandeur and contradiction. A king who wrote music, yet signed death warrants, who adored love letters and execution orders in equal measure. Was he a visionary, forced to act ruthlessly by the weight of his times? Or a man who used power as a mirror for his own fear and obsession? This story is more than history. It's a mirror that asks us, what would we do if we held that crown? Would we crumble beneath it? Or let it shape us into something we never meant to become? Because power, unchecked, does not only change kingdoms, it changes people. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Henry VIII was not the wives he lost, the friends he betrayed, or even the nation he divided, but that he could no longer tell who he was without the throne. And now, centuries later, we are left with his shadow. A shadow that still stretches through time, asking one final question. Do we wear the crown, or does it wear us? Let us know below. What do you think about Henry VIII after hearing his story? Tyrant or tragic figure? Do you see reflections of modern leaders in his actions? Would you have made different choices if you stood in his place? Comment your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that peel back the layers of power, history, and humanity. Thank you for watching.